He was a man who owned the entire city. Yet he never realized the one thing he couldn't live without was sitting right outside his office. When a velvet box from a mysterious stranger appeared on his assistant's desk, the ruthless boss discovered a terrifying truth. She was already his. Lorenzo Moretti stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his 60-story penthouse office, the glittering skyline of Chicago sprawling out beneath him like a scattered pile of diamonds on dark velvet. At 34, Lorenzo was the undisputed head of the Moretti syndicate. To the public, he was the fiercely private CEO of Moretti Holdings, a real estate and logistics empire. To the underworld, he was the judge, jury, and executioner of the Midwest's most lucrative and violent territories. He was a man composed of cold calculation and ruthless ambition. Nothing escaped his notice. No one survived his wrath. Yet for all his power, the true machinery of his life was run by a woman who currently sat 20 feet away, separated only by a wall of frosted glass. Olivia Stanton. For 5 years, Olivia had been his executive assistant. That title, however, was a gross understatement. She was his confidant, his gatekeeper, and his shadow. When Lorenzo needed a city councilman bribed without leaving a paper trail, Olivia handled it. When a shipment of illegal firearms needed to be seamlessly blended into the manifest of a commercial freightliner at the port of Chicago, Olivia forged the documents with chilling perfection. She knew where the bodies were buried, both figuratively and literally, and she navigated his blood-soaked world with the calm poise of a seasoned diplomat. Lorenzo turned away from the window, his dark eyes settling on the frosted glass. He could see her silhouette. She was already at her desk, typing away with a rhythmic, unyielding pace. It was 6 a.m. She always beat him to the office, ensuring his espresso was exactly 180 degrees Fahrenheit, and his daily briefing was neatly arranged on his mahogany desk. He walked out of his office, pushing the heavy glass door open. The outer office smelled faintly of her signature scent, something expensive, floral but sharp, like jasmine mixed with cold steel. "Morning, Mr. Moretti," Olivia said, without looking up from her dual monitors. She was dressed in a tailored charcoal blazer and a crisp white silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back into a severe, flawless chignon. Her face was striking, high cheekbones, piercing hazel eyes, and a mouth that rarely smiled but commanded absolute authority. "The Romano meeting," Lorenzo stated, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that usually made men twice his size flinch. "Moved to 2 o'clock, Olivia replied instantly, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Victor Romano tried to push it to a neutral location. I politely declined on your behalf and informed his people that if he wants the union contracts for the Southside docks, he comes to our boardroom. He confirmed 10 minutes ago. I've also prepared the financial dossiers on his offshore accounts in the Caymans. If he tries to leverage the recent federal heat on our shipping lanes, you have the proof that he's been skimming from his own capos." Lorenzo stared at her, a strange, heavy silence settling between them. Any other underboss or associate would have demanded praise for such a brilliant, aggressive maneuver. Olivia just reached for her coffee cup, taking a slow sip. "Good," Lorenzo said simply. It was the highest compliment he ever gave. "Also," Olivia added, finally glancing up, her hazel eyes meeting his dark ones, "your mother called. Again. She wants to know if you are attending the gala at the Art Museum this Saturday. I took the liberty of sending her a bouquet of white lilies and told her you were tied up with the zoning board." "Thank you, Olivia." He retreated into his office, the door clicking shut behind him. Sitting at his desk, Lorenzo felt a strange, fleeting realization brush against the edges of his consciousness. Olivia was the only constant in a life built on volatility. Women came and went in his personal life. Supermodels, heiresses, actresses, all of them drawn to his wealth and danger, and all of them dismissed when they became too demanding or too curious. But Olivia was always there. She was his anchor. He didn't view her as a woman. He viewed her as an extension of his own mind. She belonged to the empire. She belonged to him. Later that afternoon, the meeting with Victor Romano proved exactly why she was indispensable. Victor, an aging mob boss with a penchant for flashy suits and unchecked arrogance, sat across from Lorenzo in the dimly lit boardroom. 4 of Victor's armed guards stood by the door, glaring at Lorenzo's men. "You're squeezing me, Lorenzo," Victor sneered, leaning forward. "My family has controlled the South Side transit lines for 3 generations. You think you can just buy the union reps and shut me out?" Lorenzo remained perfectly still, his hands steepled in front of him. Before he could speak, the boardroom door opened quietly. Olivia walked in, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She didn't look at Victor or his heavily armed thugs. She walked directly to Lorenzo, holding a sleek black tablet. She leaned down, her shoulder brushing lightly against Lorenzo's. The faint scent of jasmine washed over him. "The wire transfers from Victor's shell company in Panama," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, yet loud enough for Victor to strain to hear. $3 million, siphoned directly from his underboss's pension fund. She placed the tablet in front of Lorenzo, pressed a single button, and the screen illuminated with irrefutable, damning evidence. Lorenzo slid his eyes to Victor, watching the older man's face drain of color. "It seems, Victor," Lorenzo said smoothly, "that you have bigger problems within your own family than a few transit lines." Victor swallowed hard, his bravado shattering. He knew that if this information leaked to his crew, he would be dead before midnight. "What do you want, Moretti?" "Everything," Lorenzo said. As Victor hurriedly signed over the territorial rights, Lorenzo watched Olivia stand quietly in the corner, her expression perfectly blank. A sudden violent surge of possessiveness hit him. She was brilliant. She was lethal. And she was his. Or so he thought. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the Romano deal, when the invisible foundation of Lorenzo's world cracked. Lorenzo had arrived at the penthouse unusually early, 5:30 a.m. He had spent the night restless, plagued by a vague, unidentifiable irritation. When he stepped off the private elevator, he expected to see the soft glow of Olivia's monitors and smell the rich aroma of his espresso. Instead, the outer office was dark. Lorenzo frowned, checking his Rolex. It was 5:35 a.m. In 5 years, Olivia had never been late. Not once. Not even when Chicago was buried under 2 feet of snow. He walked over to her pristine desk, intending to check her day planner to see if she had an off-site meeting he had forgotten about. But as he reached for the leather-bound book, his hand froze. Sitting dead center on her desk was a small, square box made of midnight blue velvet. Lorenzo stared at it. It was clearly a jeweler's box, the kind that held something highly expensive and deeply personal. Beside it rested a thick, cream-colored envelope of premium cardstock. Without hesitation, and driven by an instinct he didn't care to examine, Lorenzo picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed. He pulled out the card. The handwriting was masculine, sharp, and confident. "For tonight, beautiful. Wear it for me. Damien." Lorenzo stopped breathing. The air in the room suddenly felt dangerously thin. "Beautiful. Wear it for me. Damien." Who the hell was Damien? Lorenzo opened the velvet box. Inside, resting on white silk, was a breathtaking diamond tennis bracelet. It wasn't a cheap, generic gift. It was custom work, easily worth $50,000. It was the kind of gift a man gave a woman when he had already staked a claim on her. A dark, burning sensation coiled in Lorenzo's chest. It was a vicious, blinding jealousy, so intense and unexpected that it actually made him dizzy. He slammed the box shut, the snap echoing loudly in the quiet office. Olivia had a life outside of this office. She had a man who called her beautiful, a man who bought her diamonds. Why had she never mentioned him? Why didn't Lorenzo know about this? He knew everything about everyone in his orbit. He knew his Carpos's mistresses, his rivals' weaknesses, the exact balance of his politicians' bank accounts. Yet the woman who sat 20 feet away from him, the woman who handled his most dangerous secrets, had a mysterious lover who was wealthy enough to drop 50 grand on a Tuesday morning gift. At 6:15 a.m., the elevator doors chimed. Lorenzo was standing by her desk when she walked in. Olivia stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of him holding the velvet box. She was dressed differently today. Gone was the severe charcoal blazer. She wore a deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves in a way he had never seen before, and her hair was down, falling in dark, soft waves around her shoulders. She looked stunning. She looked like a woman who was going on a very important date. The burning in Lorenzo's chest flared into a raging fire. "Mr. Moretti," Olivia said, her voice steady, though he noticed a slight hesitation. "You're in early." "And you are late," Lorenzo replied, his voice dangerously soft. He held up the velvet box. "Care to explain this?" Olivia's spine stiffened. She walked toward him, her heels sinking into the plush carpet, and calmly took the box from his hand. Their fingers brushed, and Lorenzo felt a jolt of electricity shoot up his arm. "It's a personal item, sir," she said, slipping the box into her designer tote bag. "It was delivered by courier this morning. The front desk security brought it up." "Damien." Lorenzo tested the name on his tongue. It tasted like poison. "Who is he?" Olivia's hazel eyes flashed with a rare hint of defiance. "As I said, Mr. Moretti, it is personal. It does not interfere with my duties to you or the syndicate. Everything you do is my business, Olivia." Lorenzo stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. The scent of her jasmine perfume was intoxicating, but today it was mixed with something else. Anticipation. "You hold the keys to my entire empire. If you are sleeping with someone, I need to know who he is, for security purposes." "Security purposes," Olivia repeated, a faint, almost mocking smile touching her lips. "I assure you, Damien is not a threat to your empire. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare your 7 a.m. briefing." She turned away, dismissing him. Lorenzo stood there, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. She was lying, or at the very least, she was hiding the truth. He retreated to his office, but he didn't look at the morning reports. Instead, he picked up his encrypted phone and dialed Leo, his head of security. "Leo," Lorenzo barked the second the line connected. "I need a full background workup on a man named Damien. He's somehow connected to Olivia Stanton." There was a pause on the other end. "Olivia." "Boss, with all due respect, Olivia is a ghost outside of work. She goes home to her apartment in Lincoln Park, she reads. She goes to the gym. We've vetted her a dozen times. Vetted her again. Now, find out who Damien is, what he does, and where they are going tonight. Pull street cameras. Check courier manifests. I want everything. You got it, boss. The day dragged on in excruciatingly slow motion. Every time Lorenzo looked through the frosted glass, he saw the burgundy dress. He saw the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He imagined another man touching that hair. He imagined another man sliding that diamond bracelet onto her delicate wrist. It was driving him insane. He was Lorenzo Moretti. He commanded thousands of men and controlled billions of dollars. But right now, his entire mind was consumed by the image of his assistant in another man's arms. At 4 p.m., Leo called back. "Boss," Leo said, his voice unusually tight. "We got a hit. You're not going to like this." "Tell me," Lorenzo commanded, gripping the edge of his mahogany desk. "The courier who dropped off the package works for a private shell company. We traced the company's financials. The buyer of the bracelet is Damian Costa." Lorenzo's blood ran ice cold. Damian Costa. He knew the name well. Costa wasn't just some wealthy civilian. He was a high-level enforcer and fixer for the Romano family. He was Victor Romano's most lethal weapon, a man known for his brutality and his cunning. "Are you absolutely sure?" Lorenzo asked, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Positive," Leo confirmed. "And there's more. We tapped into the city's private restaurant reservations. Damian Costa has a private dining room booked tonight at 8 p.m. at Laura. Table for 2. Under the name Stanton." Lorenzo hung up the phone. The silence in his office was deafening. His mind raced through the implications. Was Olivia a mole? Had she been leaking information to the Romanos all these years? No. That didn't make sense. She had just handed him the evidence to crush Victor Romano a week ago. Why would she do that if she was sleeping with Romano's top enforcer? Unless Damian Costa was playing his own game. Unless Costa was trying to compromise Olivia, to use her to get to Lorenzo. Or worse, maybe Costa was trying to recruit her, to steal her away from the Moretti syndicate. Lorenzo looked through the glass. Olivia was packing up her bag. She was leaving early. She was leaving to go meet a man who was Lorenzo's sworn enemy. A dark, terrifying possessiveness clawed its way out of Lorenzo's soul, eclipsing any rational thought of business or syndicate politics. He didn't care about Victor Romano. He didn't care about the union contracts. He only cared about the woman in the burgundy dress. Damian Costa thought he could send her diamonds. Costa thought he could take her to dinner. Costa thought he could touch what belonged to Lorenzo Moretti. Lorenzo stood up, pulling his custom Brioni suit jacket over his broad shoulders, checking the weight of the Glock 19 holstered at his hip. He wasn't going to fire her. He wasn't going to interrogate her. He was going to Laura. And he was going to show Damian Costa exactly what happens when you try to steal from the devil of Chicago. The rain began to fall as Lorenzo's bulletproof Maybach pulled up to the valet stand at Laura, Chicago's most exclusive subterranean restaurant. The establishment was a playground for the city's elite, a place where million-dollar deals were struck over imported truffles and vintage Bordeaux. Lorenzo did not wait for his driver to open the door. He stepped out into the slick, wet night, the cold wind whipping the edge of his tailored coat. His security detail moved to flank him, but Lorenzo raised a single, gloved hand. "Stay outside," he commanded, his voice slicing through the sound of the rain. "Nobody comes in. Nobody comes out." He walked through the heavy mahogany doors of the restaurant. The maitre d', a polished man in a tuxedo, immediately paled. "Mr. Moretti, we were not expecting you this evening." "Damian Costa." "Private room," Lorenzo said. It was not a question. The maitre d' swallowed hard and pointed a trembling finger down the dimly lit, velvet-lined hallway to the right. Lorenzo didn't offer a word of thanks. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther stalking a wounded deer. When he reached the heavy oak double doors of the private dining suite, he did not knock. He planted his leather shoe squarely against the brass lock and kicked. The doors burst open with a violent crack, slamming against the interior walls. Inside, the scene was not at all what his tortured mind had spent the last 3 hours agonizing over. There was no soft candlelight, no romantic music, no quiet, intimate conversation. Olivia was standing on the far side of the massive oak table, her hands planted firmly on the polished wood, her hazel eyes blazing with a cold, unyielding fury. Damien Costa, a heavily built man with a scarred jawline and a cheap imitation of a bespoke suit, was sitting across from her, looking incredibly smug. Between them on the table lay the midnight blue velvet box. It was closed. Both of them snapped their heads toward the door as Lorenzo entered, pulling all the oxygen out of the room with his sheer presence. "Lorenzo," Damien said, his smug smile faltering slightly, though he tried to mask his sudden panic with a slow, arrogant drawl. "To what do we owe this unexpected pleasure?" Lorenzo ignored him completely. His eyes were locked on Olivia. The burgundy dress that had driven him mad all day now looked like armor. She was not a woman on a date. She was a woman at war. "Olivia," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously even. "Step away from him." Olivia let out a long, slow breath, the tension in her shoulders dropping slightly at the sight of him, though her expression remained guarded. "Mr. Moretti, this is a private matter. I had it completely under control. You are sitting in a room with a rat who answers to Victor Romano," Lorenzo said, stepping further into the room, his hand resting casually near the holster on his hip. "Nothing involving him is a private matter." Damien stood up, kicking his chair back. "Now listen here, Moretti. This has nothing to do with syndicate business. This is about real estate, specifically an estate that belongs to Miss Stanton." Lorenzo stopped. He looked at Olivia, his brows knitting together. "Real estate?" Olivia closed her eyes for a brief second, cursing under her breath. "Damien, shut your mouth," she snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. It was a tone Lorenzo had never heard her use, raw, authoritative, and utterly ruthless. But Damien was too desperate to listen. "You don't know, do you, Lorenzo?" Damien laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Your perfect little assistant has been holding out on you. She isn't just a secretary. She's the sole surviving heir to the Hawthorne estate." Lorenzo's mind raced. The Hawthorne estate was a ghost story in the Chicago underworld. It belonged to an old Prohibition-era rum-running family who had vanished decades ago. Rumor had it they owned an expansive hidden underground bunker network beneath an abandoned luxury hotel on the North Shore, a subterranean fortress completely off the grid, equipped with forgotten vaults and direct, untraceable subterranean access to the river shipping channels. It was a myth, a fable. "My grandfather," Olivia said quietly, her eyes finally meeting Lorenzo's. "He was the last Hawthorne. He left the property to me in a blind trust before he died. The abandoned hotel, the bunker beneath it, everything. The Romanos found out last week. Because Victor needs a new staging ground to move his product," Lorenzo finished, the pieces instantly snapping into place. Victor had lost the Southside docks to Lorenzo. Now, Victor was desperate for a new logistical hub, and an untraceable Prohibition-era bunker connected to the river was the holy grail of smuggling routes. "Exactly," Damien sneered. "We offered her a fair price. We even sent a $50,000 down payment in good faith. He gestured to the velvet box. But she refused. So I invited her here tonight to explain the severe consequences of holding on to a property she can't protect. Lorenzo's blood turned to liquid nitrogen. The jealousy that had consumed him all day evaporated, replaced instantly by a horrifying, violent realization. Damien hadn't bought the diamond bracelet as a lover. He had sent it as a bribe. And this dinner wasn't a date. It was an ambush. Damien Costa had threatened her. You threatened her, Lorenzo stated. It wasn't a question. Damien puffed out his chest, stepping around the table. I'm just doing business, Moretti. She's a civilian. She needs to understand that she can't stand in the way of... Damien never finished his sentence. Lorenzo moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed a heavy crystal wine decanter from the table and smashed it directly across Damien's jaw. The heavy glass shattered, and Damien collapsed to the floor with a gargled cry, blood instantly pooling on the expensive Persian rug. Lorenzo didn't stop. He dragged Damien up by the lapels of his cheap suit, slamming him brutally against the oak-paneled wall. He drew his Glock 19, pressing the cold steel barrel directly under Damien's chin. Listen to me very carefully, Costa, Lorenzo whispered, his voice a demonic hiss. Olivia Stanton is not a civilian. She is not a target. She is mine. If you, Victor Romano, or any of your miserable associates even look in her direction again, I will bury you in that hawthorn bunker and seal the doors with concrete. Do you understand? Damien, trembling violently and choking on his own blood, nodded frantically. Lorenzo dropped him in a heap on the floor. He didn't spare the enforcer another glance. He turned to Olivia, extended his hand, and said, We are leaving. Olivia picked up her clutch, pointedly ignoring the velvet box, and placed her hand in his. The ride back to the penthouse was wrapped in a heavy, suffocating silence. The rain drummed relentlessly against the roof of the Maybach. Olivia sat completely stiff, staring out the tinted window at the blurred city lights. Lorenzo sat beside her, the lingering adrenaline pumping through his veins, making his hands shake imperceptibly. Why didn't you tell me? Lorenzo finally asked, his voice rough. Olivia didn't turn her head. Because it was my burden, Lorenzo. The Hawthorne bunker is a massive liability. It's full of rotting infrastructure, forgotten vaults, and historical secrets. When my grandfather passed, I spent years hiding the paper trail so the syndicate wouldn't find it and use it as a war zone. When the Romanos discovered the deed transfer last week, I thought I could handle Damien Costa myself. I forge federal documents and manipulate corrupt politicians before breakfast. I thought I could intimidate a low-level enforcer without dragging you into my family's mess. Your mess is my mess, Lorenzo growled, sliding across the leather seat to close the distance between them. Olivia finally turned to look at him, her hazel eyes searching his face. I am your assistant, Lorenzo. My job is to protect your empire. I didn't want to bring a war to your doorstep. You are the empire, Lorenzo said, the truth of the statement hitting him with staggering force. He reached up, his large, rough hand gently cupping her jaw. She gasped softly at the contact. For 5 years they had existed in a dance of professional boundaries. 5 years of cold efficiency, sharp nods, and brief, accidental touches over a mahogany desk. But tonight, the glass wall between them had shattered. When I saw that velvet box on your desk this morning, Lorenzo confessed, his thumb tracing the soft line of her cheekbone, I nearly burned this entire city to the ground. I thought another man was touching you. I thought another man was looking at you the way I have wanted to look at you for 5 years. Olivia's breath hitched. Lorenzo, I don't care about the Hawthorne estate, he interrupted, his dark eyes burning into hers. "I don't care about the bunker, or the historical value, or the river access. Keep it, sell it, burn it down. I don't care. The only thing I care about is you. You are not going back to that desk on Monday. You are not my assistant anymore." Panic flared in her eyes. "You're firing me?" Lorenzo let out a dark, breathless chuckle, leaning in until his lips were mere inches from hers. "I am promoting you. You sit beside me, Olivia, not outside my door. You rule this family with me as my partner, as my queen." Olivia stared at him, the walls she had carefully constructed around her heart finally crumbling. She saw the absolute, terrifying sincerity in the eyes of the devil of Chicago. He was a ruthless, violent man, but in this moment, he belonged entirely to her. "The Romanos will retaliate," she whispered, a fierce, brilliant light returning to her eyes. "Victor will not let the assault on Damien go unpunished, and he still wants the bunker." "Let him come," Lorenzo murmured, closing the final distance and capturing her lips in a bruising, possessive kiss. It tasted of rain, adrenaline, and undeniable power. When he finally pulled back, he smiled. A dangerous, lethal expression that promised absolute destruction to their enemies. "We have a hidden fortress to defend, don't we?" From that night forward, Olivia never sat at the assistant's desk again. She took her rightful place in the boardroom, her brilliant, calculating mind merging with Lorenzo's ruthless power. The Romano family was dismantled within 6 months, and the Hawthorne bunker was never breached. Lorenzo Moretti had always owned the city, but it was only when he secured the woman who held the keys to his empire and his heart that his reign truly began. Wow, what an intense and thrilling ride. Lorenzo completely destroyed Damien and proved that absolutely no one messes with Olivia, and that shocking twist about the hidden Hawthorne bunker, it changes everything. If you loved this dramatic mafia romance and want to hear more thrilling stories filled with secrets, power, and romance, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below telling me what your favorite moment was, and I'll see you in the next story.